The world ended in fire and chaos. Cities burned, streets became tombs, and the dead walked without mercy. My name is Chris, and for the last year, I've survived the zombie apocalypse alone, not in some fortress or bunker, but on a rusted barge, drifting in the middle of a lake. This is my story of fear, isolation, and survival. The sky had turned a sickly orange, a warning I wish I had ignored. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, mixed with screams and the unmistakable growls of the undead. My name is Chris, and I never thought my life would shrink down to one simple goal: survive. It all started when the first news reports came in. A strange virus is spreading fast, they said. But by the time the reality hit, it was already too late. Cities burned, communication networks collapsed, and chaos became the only law. I had managed to grab a few essentials: backpack, water, canned food, and my old baseball bat. The streets I once walked to get groceries were now crawling with things that were once people. People I used to know. Friends, neighbors, family. I learned quickly that hiding wasn't enough. You needed to move, to scavenge, and to fight when there was no other choice. My first night, I found shelter in an abandoned convenience store, barricading the doors with whatever I could. The growls outside were relentless, but I survived the night. It wasn't just hunger or thirst I had to fear, it was the living dead, and every decision could be my last. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of this new world settle onto my shoulders. This was only the beginning. I never thought a rusted barge would become my fortress, but there it was, bobbing quietly in the center of Lake Argira. The shore was a nightmare: fires, smoke, and the shambling dead wandering aimlessly. Getting here had been pure luck. One minute I was running through flooded streets, the next, I'd pushed this old barge into the water and escaped the chaos. The barge wasn't much: a metal deck, a small cabin, and a storage hold, but it was enough. I fortified the cabin with old crates and furniture I found on the deck, creating a barricade strong enough to withstand a small horde. Every night, the groans from the distant shore reminded me that safety was temporary, that even water wasn't a guarantee. Food was scarce. I scavenged the cabin and found cans of beans, some bottled water, and an old fishing net. Fishing became my new routine, and every bite I caught was a small victory. Each day I checked the horizon, scanning for zombies or other survivors, but mostly I found silence. A haunting, echoing silence that weighed heavier than any horde could. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the barge, every splash in the water, made my heart race. I had to keep moving, keep alert. My baseball bat was my constant companion, always within reach, a reminder that even on a floating fortress, danger could strike at any moment. I began marking the days on the wall of the cabin, small scratches, counting how long I had been alive, how long I had been away from the world I once knew. Each mark was a reminder: survival isn't just about avoiding the dead, it's about holding on to your mind when everything else is lost. The sun set behind the trees, casting long shadows across the lake. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just surviving, I was truly alone, and the water that saved me also separated me from any hope of help. The barge had become my prison, my refuge, and my battleground all at once. Tonight, like every night, I would keep my eyes open, my ears sharp, and my hands ready. Because on this lake, one mistake could be the end, and the zombies, patient, relentless, would be waiting. The barge was safe for now, but I couldn't survive on fishing alone forever. I needed supplies, food, water, maybe weapons. The lake wasn't just a prison, it was also a pathway. I tied a small rowboat to the barge and pushed off, letting the fog guide me silently toward the nearest shore. The village was eerily quiet. Roofs were caved in, windows shattered, and doors hung crooked on their hinges. My boots splashed in the shallow water at the edge as I scanned every shadow, every corner. One wrong step, and the dead could end it all. Inside the first house, I found canned food, a dusty first aid kit, and an old hunting knife. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Then, I heard it, a low groan from the next room. My heart skipped a beat. I gripped my bat tightly and slowly pushed the door open. Two zombies, their clothes torn, eyes empty, staggered toward me. Time slowed. I swung the bat. One fell with a sickening thud. The other reached for me, cold fingers brushing my arm, but I swung again, harder. Silence returned. For a moment, I thought I could breathe. But the groans echoed outside, carried by the wind over the lake. More were coming. I grabbed what I could and ran back to the rowboat, blood pounding, heart racing. Every stroke away from the shore felt like an eternity. Back on the barge, I stacked my finds carefully, securing the cabin. My hands shook, not from fear, but from adrenaline. For the first time, I understood what survival really meant. You can't be safe anywhere, even on water. Night fell quickly. The lake became a mirror, reflecting the pale moonlight and the occasional shadow of a zombie stumbling along the shore. I stayed awake, listening, thinking, planning. Tomorrow I would need to go out again, because staying alive wasn't optional. The morning mist clung to the lake like a shroud. From the safety of the barge, I could see the shore, and the ruined village I had scavenged the day before. I knew I couldn't just drift aimlessly forever. The barge had to become a real fortress. I spent the morning reinforcing the cabin doors with planks from the deck and barrels I found floating nearby. I set up makeshift alarms, old cans tied to ropes, that would rattle if anything approached. Every creak of wood, every splash in the water, made my heart race. The barge was my world now, but it was still fragile. By afternoon, I decided to check the lake perimeter. The rowboat pushed quietly through the fog, but the silence was deceptive. Halfway to the next cove, I heard it, a splash behind me. My stomach dropped. A small group of zombies had followed me from the shore, drawn by my movements. Panic surged, but training kicks in during moments like this. I rowed as fast as I could, weaving through small islands and reeds. One of them lunged from a shallow spot, hands grabbing at the boat. I shoved it off with the paddle, watching it sink into the murky water. Back on the barge, soaked and shaking, I realized something chilling. The lake might have saved me at first, but it was no guarantee. Zombies could still reach me if I wasn't vigilant. I spent the night on high alert, listening to every ripple in the water, every distant groan. My barge had become more than a refuge. It was my battleground, my prison, and now, my home. The lake was quiet for a while, too quiet. I knew tomorrow I'd have to venture out again. Supplies wouldn't wait, and neither would the dead. The fog was thinner today, sunlight cutting through the mist like blades. I untied my rowboat and pushed off from the barge, scanning the lake for anything useful. That's when I saw it, a second boat, partially hidden near a cluster of reeds, rocking gently in the water. I approached cautiously. The smell hit me first, stale water and rot, but it wasn't human. No groans, no movement, just a chance. The boat was an old fishing vessel, its hull patched and worn, but inside, I found a treasure trove. Bottled water, canned beans, fishing gear, a small first aid kit, even a flare gun. My heart raced with excitement. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. But hope is dangerous in this world. As I loaded the supplies into my rowboat, I noticed scratches along the wood, teeth marks, claw marks. Something had been here before me. I froze, listening. A faint splash echoed across the water. I wasn't alone. A group of zombies had been following the scent trail of the abandoned boat. They emerged from the reeds, shambling toward me, drawn to the noise. My rowboat was half loaded. There was no time to hesitate. I pushed off, paddle in hand, swinging at the nearest one when it tried to grab the side. The water churned as I rowed furiously, my heart pounding with adrenaline. Each stroke felt like it could be my last. The zombies reached the edge of the boat, snapping, clawing, but one by one, I shook them off, the water swallowing them behind me. Back on the barge, soaked but alive, I stacked my newfound supplies carefully. The flare gun rested on the cabin table, a lifeline if the dead ever got too close. As night fell over the lake, I realized the barge wasn't just a refuge anymore. With these supplies, I could survive longer, maybe even plan further. But every victory carried a warning. In this world, nothing stays safe, and the dead are always patient. The morning sun glinted off the water, but I barely noticed. My mind was on fortifying the barge. I spent hours nailing planks over weak spots, stacking barrels along the sides, and setting simple traps with ropes and cans to alert me if anything, or anyone, approached. The barge was slowly turning into a real fortress, a floating home I could survive in, if I was careful. While checking the perimeter, something caught my eye. Footprints in the mud along the lake's edge. Human footprints. Not zombie tracks, these were deliberate, cautious, like someone moving silently to avoid detection. My heart skipped a beat. A survivor, or a trap. I rowed closer to investigate, keeping low and silent. The footprints led to a small dock, abandoned for months. A makeshift fire pit had been recently used, the ashes still warm. Whoever had been here had left in a hurry, but they weren't far. I realized the implications immediately. Another person meant hope, but also danger. In a world full of the dead, the living could be just as unpredictable. Friend or foe, stranger or threat, it was impossible to tell. Back on the barge, I planned my next move. I could try to follow them tomorrow, find out who they were. Or I could stay put, safe but isolated, letting the chance for human contact slip away. As night fell, the lake was quiet again, broken only by distant groans from the shore. I stared at the dark horizon, the fire pit glowing faintly, wondering, was it worth the risk to reach out? Or was staying alone safer? I didn't have the answer. Not yet. I couldn't sleep. The thought of another human out there kept me awake, heart hammering with a mix of hope and dread. By first light, I untied the rowboat and paddled quietly toward the small dock where I had found the footprints and the warm ashes. The dock was empty, but the tracks were fresh, leading into a dense patch of reeds. I moved slowly, trying not to snap a branch or make a sound. The water lapped at my boots, every splash echoing like a gunshot in the silence. Then I saw movement, someone crouched behind an overturned boat. A woman, ragged clothes, eyes wide but alert. She was armed with a hunting knife, and the tension between us was immediate. "Wait, I'm not," I started, hands raised, but she backed away, knife pointed. "I know," she said cautiously. "I saw you on the lake. I'm not here to fight, yet." We sized each other up. Both desperate, both wary. Trust was a luxury neither of us could afford. I introduced myself, Chris. She didn't give her name, just a nod, signaling she understood the unspoken rule: survive first, trust later. We decided on a temporary truce. She showed me a hidden cache nearby, canned food, fresh water, and even some old medical supplies. For the first time in weeks, I felt relief, maybe even hope. Two people could survive better than one. But the alliance came with rules: stay vigilant, stay alert, and never let your guard down. Because in this world, danger lurked not just in the undead, but in the choices of the living. That night, back on the barge, I stared out over the dark water. I wasn't alone anymore, but the lake hadn't gotten any safer. And tomorrow, the real test would begin. Morning broke over the lake, painting the water in silver and gold. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel completely alone. The survivor, let's call her Elena, had agreed to stay on the barge with me. We moved with purpose, knowing that the barge was our only real chance to survive. Together, we fortified the cabin even more. Elena found old ropes and barrels, helping me secure the weak points along the deck. We created lookouts at each corner, tying up fishing lines with small bells to act as alarms. Every sound in the water could be a threat, and now we had two pairs of eyes watching. By midday, we split tasks. I went out in the rowboat to scavenge nearby docks and abandoned houses, while Elena stayed behind, strengthening the cabin and preparing food. Even simple teamwork felt like a miracle after weeks of isolation. That evening, the first real test came. A distant splash caught my attention, a group of zombies, drawn by noise, making their way toward the barge. I rowed back as fast as I could, adrenaline pumping. Elena grabbed a flare gun and shouted instructions, guiding me to the safest entry point. On the deck, we moved like a coordinated unit. I swung the bat to keep any close attackers at bay, while Elena used makeshift spears to push back the ones that tried to climb aboard. The horde was relentless, but together we managed to keep them off the barge. After what felt like hours, but was only minutes, we finally forced them back into the water. Silence returned, broken only by our heavy breathing and the gentle lapping of the lake. For the first time, I realized something important: survival wasn't just about being strong, it was about trust, cooperation, and having someone who had your back. That night, We sat side by side on the deck, eating canned beans and sharing stories of life before the apocalypse. The lake was still dark and dangerous, but somehow, with Elena beside me, it felt like a place we could defend together. The barge wasn't just a refuge anymore. It was home, and our fortress against the dead. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of smoke from the distant shore. I stood at the edge of the barge, staring at the small island a few hundred meters away. Rumor, or maybe luck, had it that someone had left supplies there before the world fell apart. Elena joined me silently, checking the flare gun and the makeshift spears we had fashioned. "We'll need to be careful," she said. "One misstep, and the dead could trap us between the barge and the shore." We tied the rowboat securely and pushed off, gliding over the calm water. Every ripple made me tense, every shadow in the fog could hide danger. The closer we got, the more evidence we saw: toppled trees, abandoned fishing nets, and faint blood stains along the shore. Someone, or something, had been here before us. On the island, we moved slowly, sweeping each abandoned hut and cabin for food, water, and tools. A few cans of beans, bottled water, and even a rusty machete, enough to make the trip worth it, but not without risk. Then we heard it, a low, guttural growl from the trees. I froze. Elena motioned for silence. A small group of zombies emerged, shambling toward us from the woods. We ducked behind a broken wall, hearts pounding. Working together was instinct now. I distracted one with a thrown log while Elena snuck behind to finish it off with her spear. The horde moved clumsily, and we took advantage of their slow, mindless aggression, pushing them back toward the edge of the island. Finally, we reached the rowboat with our supplies intact. We loaded everything quickly, keeping our eyes on the shoreline. One zombie lunged as we pushed off, but a well-placed swing from my bat sent it back into the water. Back on the barge, soaked and exhausted, we stacked the supplies carefully. The island had given us a lifeline, but also a reminder: the lake might be our refuge, but it isn't safe. Every venture comes with a price. That night, as we sat on the deck, Elena looked at me and said quietly, "We make a good team, Chris. Together, we might actually survive this." I nodded, feeling it too. Alone, we had survived. Together, maybe we had a chance to thrive. Night fell over the lake like a black curtain, and with it came the creeping terror that neither of us could ignore. The barge was quiet, but I knew better than to trust silence. Elena and I moved swiftly, reinforcing the cabin and the deck one last time before darkness fully swallowed us. We set tripwires with cans around the edges, improvised spikes along the weakest points, and even covered one side with oil-soaked planks that could be set aflame if the dead got too close. It was crude, but in this world, ingenuity was survival. As the moon rose, so did the first signs of trouble. Splashing noises reached our ears, multiple intruders moving through the water toward the barge. A horde, bigger than anything we had faced so far. "Get ready," Elena whispered, her eyes sharp in the moonlight. We coordinated silently, each movement rehearsed over the past days. When the first zombie reached the deck, I swung my bat with precision, while Elena jabbed with her spear. One by one, we repelled them, using fire and noise to push the rest back. It was exhausting, terrifying, and exhilarating all at once. Our trust in each other was the only thing keeping us alive. Every time a zombie lurched toward the cabin, one of us covered the other. Every scream or groan tested our nerves, but together, we held the line. By dawn, the horde had retreated, leaving only ripples in the water and the faint stench of decay. We collapsed on the deck, covered in sweat and mud, hearts racing, but alive. This, I said, breathing heavily, this is why we need each other. Alone, we would have been dead hours ago. Elena nodded, her expression grim but determined. And together, we might just survive the rest of this nightmare. For the first time, the lake felt less like a prison and more like a fortress we had a chance to defend. But as the sun rose, casting light on the water, I knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning. The dead weren't done with us yet. The lake was deceptively calm that morning, sunlight glittering across the water. Elena and I had a plan: expand the barge, gather more supplies, and create a floating fortress that could withstand longer sieges. Survival wasn't just about today anymore, it was about building something sustainable. We rowed to a nearby dock known from old maps, finding another abandoned boat we could attach to the barge. Together, we lashed it with ropes and barrels, creating extra deck space. Every plank we secured made the barge feel more like a home, less like a rickety prison. But supplies were the real challenge. We ventured further along the shore, checking abandoned cabins and small warehouses. Canned food, water, and even a couple of dusty rifles, we collected everything we could carry. Each trip back to the barge felt like a gamble. Every shadow could hide the dead, and sometimes, they did. One encounter nearly ended it. A small horde had wandered close to the shore while we were scavenging. We barely escaped, rowing furiously, swinging paddles, and using a flare to scare them back into the trees. Back on the barge, hearts pounding, we realized the lake offered isolation but no immunity. Danger could find us anywhere. Still, the fortress grew. We reinforced the cabins, added barricades to the new attached boat, and set up higher lookout points. Elena rigged a signal system with mirrors and cans to warn us of approaching zombies, while I fortified the deck and secured the rowboat. By nightfall, the barge wasn't just a temporary refuge anymore, it was a stronghold. We sat together on the deck, sharing the last of the warm food, and for a moment, we allowed ourselves to feel something we hadn't in months: hope. "I think we can make it," Elena said quietly, scanning the dark horizon. I nodded. Together, we can survive anything. But even as we spoke, distant splashes reminded us that the dead were patient. They didn't tire, and they didn't forgive. Our floating fortress was only as strong as our vigilance, and our trust in each other. The barge had become more than just a refuge, it was our fortress, our home. Yet, the lake remained vast and unpredictable. Supplies were running low, and the constant vigilance was wearing us down. That morning, as I scanned the horizon from the deck, I spotted movement, another small rowboat approaching, paddling cautiously. Elena and I exchanged tense glances. Another survivor, or a trap. We quickly secured the deck and prepared our weapons, keeping the flare gun ready. The rowboat reached the barge slowly, and a man climbed aboard, hands raised in surrender. "Hey, I'm not here to fight," he called, voice shaky but honest. He introduced himself as Marco, a former fisherman who had survived near the opposite shore. Trust was hard to come by, but desperation made it easier. We let him stay, and he immediately offered something invaluable: knowledge of nearby supply caches and safe points along the lake. Together, the three of us could stretch our resources further than ever before. Yet, survival in this world wasn't just about alliances, it was about sharing limited resources. Tensions arose quickly. Elena worried that food would run out faster with Marco on board. Marco, desperate and exhausted, argued for ration flexibility. I had to mediate, keeping calm while ensuring everyone understood the stakes. Cooperation meant life, division meant death. That night, we sat on the deck, the moon reflecting off the water. For the first time, I realized the world had changed permanently. Safety wasn't just about avoiding the dead, it was about navigating the living. We had a stronger team now, yes, but the barge wasn't invincible. Every splash, every groan, reminded us that danger was never far. And in this world, trust was both a weapon and a risk. The sun rose over the lake, painting the water in shades of gold and silver. Supplies were dwindling faster than we anticipated. The barge was fortified, but food and medical kits wouldn't last forever. Marco spoke of a warehouse a few kilometers down the lake, a place abandoned but reportedly stocked with everything we could need. We planned carefully. Rowing to the warehouse meant crossing open water, where the dead could spot us easily. Elena checked the flare gun, I secured the bat and spears, and Marco double-checked our rowboat. Every detail mattered, every mistake could be fatal. The trip was tense. Fog clung to the water, hiding our path, but also hiding threats. Halfway there, splashes echoed from the shore, zombies moving along the bank. We froze, watching shadows lurch and shuffle, then paddled silently, keeping low in the boat. Adrenaline coursed through our veins with every stroke. At the warehouse, we approached cautiously. Broken doors creaked as we entered, and the smell of decay filled the air. We found shelves stocked with canned food, water, and even a few unopened boxes of medical supplies. Our hearts raced, we had hit the jackpot. But danger never rested. A horde, drawn by our noise, pressed in from the surrounding area. We barricaded ourselves inside, using crates and metal sheets to hold the doors. Every swing of the bat, every spear thrust, kept the dead at bay. Together, we fought with precision, trust, and sheer determination. By the time the horde dispersed, we had loaded what we could carry and slipped back to the barge under the cover of fog. Exhausted but triumphant, we stacked our bounty carefully. Supplies, tools, and hope, enough to last weeks if we rationed wisely. That night, as we sat on the deck, I realized something profound: we weren't just surviving. With Elena and Marco, we were building a community, a small beacon of life in a world overrun by death. The lake was still dangerous, but together, we had a fighting chance. The lake was eerily calm that night, the moon casting silver light over the barge. After our successful warehouse run, we were exhausted, but we knew rest was dangerous. Elena and Marco took turns on lookout, and I checked our barricades and traps one last time. Around midnight, a low, gurgling chorus rose from the water. At first, I thought it was a dream, but the sound grew louder, more coordinated. Zombies were approaching, hundreds of them, pushed by hunger and instinct. We sprang into action. Elena fired the flare gun, casting bright light across the deck, while Marco helped me push barrels into the water to block the shallow edge. The first wave hit, clawing at the sides of the barge, but our traps and spikes slowed them down. It was chaos, splashes, groans, and the sharp sound of makeshift weapons striking flesh. But we moved as one. Elena covered the cabin entrance, Marco handled the deck, and I swung at anything that tried to climb aboard. Every second was a fight for survival, every movement relying on trust and instinct. By dawn, the horde had thinned, retreating into the foggy distance. We were battered, bruised, and exhausted, but alive. The barge had held. For the first time, I truly understood the value of allies in this world. Alone, none of us would have survived. Together, we could face almost anything. As the sun rose, painting the lake in pale light, we surveyed the damage, scratches on the deck, a few broken planks, but our fortress had endured. And so had we. Elena sat beside me, her face streaked with grime but resolute. Marco leaned against the cabin wall, catching his breath. We didn't speak much, words were unnecessary. We had survived the night together, and that was enough. For the first time in a long while, I felt something close to hope. The lake was still dangerous, but now we were stronger, not just in weapons or barricades, but in trust, teamwork, and the bonds we had forged in the darkness. The lake was quiet, almost peaceful, as dawn broke. After weeks of endless struggle, nights of terror, and battles with the dead, the barge finally felt like home. Every plank we had reinforced, every trap we had set, and every supply we had salvaged now formed a fortress, not just of wood and metal, but of trust and teamwork. Elena moved across the deck, checking the barricades one last time, while Marco organized the supplies into neat stacks. I leaned against the railing, looking out over the water, remembering the first day I had drifted alone on this lake. How fragile I had felt. How hopeless. Now, we had each other. And that made all the difference. We spent the morning planning long-term survival. Fishing schedules, supply runs, defensive rotations, everything had a place. We even mapped escape routes in case the barge was ever overrun. For the first time, survival wasn't just reactive, it was strategic. As we sat together sharing a meager breakfast, laughter broke out for the first time in months. Not the nervous laughter of fear, but the genuine kind, born from relief and shared victory. The dead were still out there, yes, but the living had found strength in each other. I realized that survival wasn't just about avoiding death. It was about building something worth living for, even in a world that had lost almost everything. And here, on this floating fortress, we had found a spark of life, a reason to keep going. The sun rose higher, casting golden light over the lake, illuminating the barge, our home, our stronghold. We had survived the apocalypse. Not alone, but together. And maybe, just maybe, we could thrive. Wow, what a journey. Chris, Elena, and Marco survived the apocalypse on the lake, proving that even in the darkest times, trust, teamwork, and hope can make all the difference. If you enjoyed this adventure, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more survival stories, epic adventures, and intense zombie action. Also, hit the notification bell so you never miss a chapter of our next story. Thanks for watching, and remember, Survival isn't just about staying alive, it's about fighting together and never giving up. See you in the next adventure.